I'm in Max. You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon. Why, hello, and welcome to Season 25, Episode 12 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
I'm Stork.
I'm Gina.
And in this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Tarlin asks what makes a good session zero. Ed from Florida, nay Minnesota, asks why we game. And Ben from Texas tries to resurrect the crunch versus flush. The crunch versus flush debate.
Yeah.
Fluff.
Yeah.
But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. And we're on social medias. Yes. First, we have a forum, happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. And for our social media orgs, you go to happyjacksrpg on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and MeWe and that it?
And Mastodon is part of it.
No, we're not part of Mastodon. We get kicked out of that. If you'd like to watch the show live, you can watch the show at happyjacks.org/live. That's happyjacks.org/live. And we do the show at 7:09 p.m. Pacific time on Friday nights. And you can watch us and see our faces and join the chat room and say hello to the chat room. Hi, chat room.
Hello.
I don't have you up yet, but I will bring you up here in a second. And I think that's it. I don't think there's any other announcements.
I think so.
No,
I don't think
so.
so.
No cons coming up?
Well, February con.
Oh, yeah.
President's Day weekend at the LAX Hilton Hotel. I should book a room. I finally paid off the last one.
Yeah, right. They're expensive. That's one of the reasons I haven't been in a while. It's like I think the last time I did the con, it was almost $1,000 with the room and the food. And I think I got stuck with a bill at one point.
Oh.
Yeah.
I usually have to pay in advance to get a cheaper.
Oh, that
room.
and I waited too long and I had to pay full price for the room too, which was like another $75. Anyway, it was like, it was really expensive.
It gets up there. It gets way up there.
When all was said and done.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
It is. It is, except for the fact that the bar opens too late, and...
Really, I thought I was the only one that bothered.
No, it bothered me too. All right. What makes a good session zero from Tarlin? Greetings, happy flapjackers.
I know that's a new one. They're always,
So my regular Saturday night crew has got a new GM warming up a steampunk/supers game for us.
Ooh.
And we've all agreed that we need a session zero. I'm just not sure that we all agree on what that is. I mean, we forced ourselves to hold off on character generation because the feeling is that we need to know more about the game that he wants to run and the world we want to play in and the action we're expecting before we can even start to make characters. Because we've had less than good experiences in the past where we've tried it the other way. We're emailing questions like, what sort of team are we? Avengers, powerful and public. X-Men, powerful but secret. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., less powerful, secret government. We're looking for rules/hints/questions to flesh out our home city. We're discussing how and how strongly our PCs should be connected. Obviously, we're taking a kitchen sink approach to this, but I was curious what you awesome douchebags would think would be important for a good session zero. So take a drink and have at it.
Huzzah.
Yeah.
I would first like to say, because I just wrote an article that the Patreon people will see sometime in November about prep. And this kind of dovetails that a little bit because I think that there's like maybe 3 different ways to approach a session zero. There's a session zero where the GM has prepped the world and has at least some sort of meta plot in mind. So that session zero is really for the GM to sort of inform the players, here's the world that we're going to be playing the game in, make characters that will fit in this game with these initial plot hooks or whatever. Then there's the like what Tappy would say, which is, I don't even start prepping the game until I see the characters. So everyone make characters. Then he will go away for 2 weeks and work on the world and fit it together. And then the third is when it's very, very collaborative and everything is kind of done at the table. Those are kind of the three ways that I see session zeros going for the most part. But that's just sort of like the general prep thing. I think there's a lot more other stuff that doesn't have to do with prep that should probably happen at one as well, like ground rules about things like what sort of material is acceptable, what sort of material do you want to avoid, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
I think specifically with this type of genre, with cyberpunk and supers games, you really do need to all get together and agree on what you want to do. Because it really sucks, for example, with supers games, because I've had this happen, where people make cosmic power characters and somebody makes Daredevil.
Right.
And it's really hard to find something for Daredevil to do while Thor is busy smashing the giant robot. Likewise, with a cyberpunk game, you all don't want to make, street level characters and everything's going to be really fancy and corporate, or maybe you do, but you need to know that you're getting into it. It's kind of important to hash all that stuff out ahead of time, and in some ways, it's important to sit down with the GM and work that stuff out together. I think asking him questions and having them send it back, it just seems like it's going to take a long time. I think you could probably sit down over beers and work this stuff out, and then everybody can go away and then make characters, or come back with make characters the next time with a concept. But this isn't a problem in a D&D game, because everybody's sort of kind of on the same level when they first start. Whether you make a cleric or whether you make a fighter, you're still going to be effective with your character class. Not so much with a supers game.
But you also want to make sure that you don't end up with a game with 5 clerics.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And and there might be things where somebody wants you to do Adventure League types of characters, and you don't use, any of the stuff that comes from any of the other adventure books, or that comes,
Yeah, a game of 5 clerics might be really fun.
It could be.
I also
Be
think
a whole Knights Templar thing going on.
it depends on what kind of session zero you want. Also, in addition to the kind of 3 sort of the types you laid out, you could say that we're going to have a session zero where we do world creation and we do character creation that day. So everybody doesn't have to walk away with a fully fleshed character, depending on if you're playing vampire or if you're playing masks. But I think that a lot of times if you do character creation together as a group, some of those things come up because people are taking whatever, depending on your system, you're making a character, and if not being redundant is important to you, then you kind of pick up what other people are filling in for their characters, so that you do something different. And then things like, if you were playing cyberpunk and not supers, like tech levels and things like that, or what do we want to have in our world, and what is this world like, and that sort of thing come up as you're playing that game, and bonds with the characters.
Especially with cyberpunk, because they know the world that they exist in. It's not like it's going to be a surprise to them, like, oh my god, it's like they're all in that city, in that world.
Well, there's still variants within cyberpunk. I mean, you've got like
Yeah.
Shadowrun,
Yeah.
where it's
Well, yeah.
like it's also fantasy, and then you've got actual like real cyberpunk. Sorry, which is it doesn't have elves and dwarves.
No.
Yeah.
And
It's
Well,
really-
and this one they're talking about doing steampunk too.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Exactly.
that can
Yeah.
go very.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a a genre where you ask 5 steampunk enthusiasts, you're going to get 12
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept saying cyberpunk, but it's actually steampunk, which is
Yeah.
Victorian era superheroes. So
I like making characters at the table. I do think some advanced questions are cool, because then people can kind of spitball ideas like, oh, I have 3 or 4 character ideas in my head and I want to hear what other people have for ideas. So kind of having a basic understanding of the game that are we going to play a heist game? Are we playing what is our, Blades and or not Blades in the Dark, Scum and Villainy game look like? Is this like do we look like Star Wars? Are we Han and Chewie, or are we, the Rebellion, or are we? So there are layers of that, but as long as you kind of establish something to walk in the door with, then you kind of are able to flesh out more of that stuff at the table. So I liked having some of it in advance, just not too much.
Yeah.
I think giving like prompt questions,
Yeah.
just so people can start thinking about character creation. That's a fantastic idea. I think.
I do too.
I-
So that there's a little bit of thinking before you sit
Yeah.
down.
So like I have no idea what
Analysis
everyone does that.
paralysis.
It's like this is going to be a long,
Yeah.
long session 0.
Yeah. So I think that, yeah, I totally agree. And generally when I'm running games, that's what I do is I am like, okay, like everyone pick your playbook or pick your class or whatever it is, like via email or text or whatever it is, so that when we come to the table, everybody has at least that baseline down. So then they, and usually, like Gina said, they've been kind of coming up with a couple character concepts. So then you can really at the table like jump into character creation, and then the part that I think is even more valuable is like the character connections.
Yeah.
How do they know each other already? Because we've all done like, oh, you all are strangers and you meet in a tavern, and every once in a while it's fun to go back to that. But then it's like, as a GM, it's like infuriating the first like 2 or 3 sessions when they're like, oh, we don't trust each other. It's like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Your characters, I guess, don't, but this is, and that's sometimes fun to explore. But if you start every campaign that way, it starts getting kind of old.
You can start that campaign with the players don't know each other, and that can be fun.
Yes.
But you need to make sure you have some sort of unifying plot hook or something to initially draw all of the characters into it.
Right.
So that at least they have, here's one little point in history that just happened this first session that we all share.
Yeah.
And then, because one of the things I just noted that I think would be a smart ground rule to establish in a session 0 is this a game where the party is going to be cooperative and work like a well-oiled machine? Or is there going to be inter-party conflict?
Yeah.
Is there going to be, is part of the story going to be how these people who maybe don't like each other do work together, or maybe don't work together?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
also, how to what extent that's going to go? Is that going to go to the point where you're just taking quips at each other, or are you actually going to slug it out at some point?
Yeah.
Or plot each other's murders, if you're in case of vampire or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to touch on and make sure everyone's at least on the same page, or at least knows what the table's sort of temperature is on that kind of stuff.
Oh, I was just going to say, Stu, you had a good idea for your conspiracy moment of truth, where, maybe these are people who don't even know each other and they're going to end up together, but there is sort of a meta idea behind, you need to make a character who's going to want to be involved in this kind of adventure, and not just go,
The fun thing about the Supers game, you can take the tried and true Stan Lee method, which is when 2 superheroes meet for the first time, they fight each other. Usually what you do with a Supers game, it's great. You just start out with some robbery or an explosion or a giant robot. So all the heroes in the area then converge in the area to combat a common evil thing, and then they basically meet right then and there, which you could do in D&D, I guess, too. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think like that inter-party conflict is my favorite part of games.
Yeah.
Shocking, I'm sure, to all of you. So for me, those get much deeper if you already have backstory and history. Like you can start with people who just meet and they don't like each other for generally more surface level reasons. But I love no, we dated 5 years ago, and then now we haven't seen each other in 4 years, and now we're on rival superhero teams or whatever. And so then it's like, okay, but now we've both been assigned to this thing by Argus or whatever, and then I don't know. For me, there's like a whole nother layer of drama there that if you guys do character connections, and you don't have to do a lot of it, you could use this amazing game that I've heard of
I know, I was going to say, I'll bring it up if you know.
called Decima that you can find at goldenlassogames.com/Decima that helps you facilitate that.
goldenlassogames.com. Okay.
Yes. /Decima.
Gotta be clear.
Yeah, sorry. I'm nervous because now I'm like feeling like
I would have brought it up if you did.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too.
But there's also there's a lot of things you can just take the questions from a lot of
Yeah.
PBTA games, and then each person gets like one question: who's someone you trust on the team, or you and so did a job together at one point, and even little things like that, even if it's not huge drama moments, just kind of help facilitate the dynamics at the table. And honestly, no matter what I run in the future, like I've used it with Wild Talents, I've used it with a lot of systems that don't have it built in, and I just find it makes as a GM, like everything just slides right into place. It's like putting a boat in the water with like a ramp there. Just like suddenly everything's floating and moving and kind of going the right direction because there's just a little bit of momentum already there.
Yeah, that's what I like about those types of, like Dakuma or the PBTA questions and the bonds things and stuff like that, is that it absolutely does that. And it doesn't have to be 3 pages of backstory. It can even be evocative words. There are games like Night Witches where it's like there's a word you feel about character X. So it's like, do you trust them? Do you not trust them? Are you jealous of them? Are you in love with them? Do you look up to them? Like even things like that. And then you and the other person, those are the kinds of things that you can explore at the table. But you don't even, and this would be my one word of caution for session zeros, and I got this advice from very good friends, is don't play before you play kind of thing too. So don't feel like you have to flesh out every note of that.
Yeah.
So like Kimmy's a great example of, we dated before, dated, so we aren't dating anymore. Maybe we have a conversation about how that happened. Maybe we didn't. Maybe it comes up in game. Maybe it doesn't. Some of that stuff. But when you're sitting at the table, I think those are absolutely things I would, definitely say that should come up.
A Traveler does a really good job at combining all of that with your character gen, and I don't see any reason that you can't do a hybrid version of that as you're creating your characters, especially if you're doing something as complicated as GURPS or something where characters take a long time to sort of generate anyway, and you can sort of discuss all this stuff. I wanted to get back to, you have all these great questions that you're asking your GM, and all of these things, they're not unreasonable at all. I would think that come up with that list, and that's important. And then it reminded me or sparked the memory that Stu used to have a list of questions that he would ask all of his players as a GM.
Yeah.
I don't think it's unreasonable for your GM or ask your GM to come up with a list of questions that he wants answered, and that will give you an idea of what he's got planned and what the tone of the game that he's expecting to run, and you guys can work within that. It's not railroading per se. It's just sort of giving you a bare bones skeleton of what we're doing. It's like I said, you don't want to make a water dwelling character and everything takes place in the desert.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's important too, because I like creating the setting at the table, but I also generally I come in with a skeleton there that then the players can help me fill in. So it's like starting masks on this Wednesday. So we're doing a session 0. We're doing character creation and kind of world creation. But I've already said, hey, this is the high school you go to. This is the superhero training program that you go to on weekends and after school, and you actually live in the dorms there.
Awesome.
So it's like they get to flesh out okay, well, our homeroom teacher's name is so-and-so. But I've basically already given them the high school is mundane. You have to keep your secret identities a secret there. You can't use your powers, or at least be seen to be using your powers, stuff like that.
Right.
So there's some parameters, and then they get to color in the lines I've already made.
I think when Stu did, was it the first Eldamy game where you gave us a paragraph of what the world was kind of like, and some of the geopolitical things going on. It wasn't very long. It was like a page maybe, and it hit some bullet points so that we kind of had an idea of what we were getting ourselves into and what we can do.
And that's a great thing because we referenced it back a lot later, because I've got a goldfish brain and I can't remember, oh wait, were those guys our enemies or were they our allies? And then it's all in that thing.
I like also having, as much as I think it should be freeform and there should be a lot of conversation at the table, I think it's a good idea for the storyteller or the GM to walk in with sort of a structure in place, like, hey, I want to start with, let's talk about, here's the world as what I've kind of got fleshed out, or do we just want to go through character creation and everything's going to come up that way? Because otherwise you can. I mean, I have sat in session 0s that are literally 9 hours long, and we have a lot of fun and we drink a lot of beer and whatever, but we maybe didn't get everything done.
Yeah.
That's that's one of the reasons that I think a lot of people will skip the session 0s because they don't have a lot of time, and maybe they only get to play once a month or something.
Yeah.
And they'd rather spend the time playing.
Yeah.
So I mean, and if you got a group that's all on the same page and been playing together for a long time, you probably don't need to do that.
Yeah. We can do.
They're all going to make the same kind of characters anyway.
Not necessarily.
I'm going to make a ranger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can do a session 0 in 30 minutes if you plan ahead. Especially like Stork was saying, there's a lot of systems that are point-buy systems. If you give everybody the same point-buy, and you talk a little bit about it online, you can get everybody, and they can build their characters at home, be about the same power level. Make sure everybody, nobody built a water character for a desert campaign.
Or an accountant for a murder
so
campaign.
you can plan that. You can have all that stuff that generally is like the most time-consuming stuff done. Do a couple connection questions, and then explain the world a little bit, and then just get started and jump in. Although the one thing I think that is the most important thing for session 0 is actually to agree on what safety tools you're going to use, if any. And that, I think, is the number one most important thing, and which you can also do ahead of time if you guys are a group that have worked together a lot and know how the safety tools work. One thing I've really liked, and Stu actually did this, and I've seen a lot of people online starting to do this too, doing lines and veils ahead of time with an anonymous Google Doc.
Right.
Because there's been a lot of discussion on RPG Twitter lately about how sometimes it's hard in session 0 to be like, no, this is a line for me, this is a veil, because saying it sometimes is hard. So if it's a doc, you just have a column for lines and a column for veils, and people just type it in anonymously. You just share the link rather than sharing it to individual people. So then it's just anonymous.
There's no history to. I want to know who.
Exactly.
About that kind of detail.
Yeah, and those most of those safety tools are written to not just be okay, we talked about it and now we're done anyway. Mm-hmm. So regardless of what you use, and you kind of referenced this earlier, I think, Stu, when you were talking, you didn't talk about lines or veils or whatever, but you talked about what you want to see in the game and what you don't want to see in the game. Right. But that those are also living situations that go on into gameplay, and they should go on into gameplay, but to Kimmy's point, your utilization of those in a session 0, and especially discussing are we going to do the fast forward, pause, rewind, or are we going to do lines and veils, or are we going to do an X card? You should have that discussion in advance so that people know what they can expect if they do get to a point where they want to have a line or a veil for something, or X card something. That's a really good point.
And also discuss the behavior around those. No asking questions, all of that. Because there should be a comfortable way for you to say that there's a line or a veil or hit an X card without feeling uncomfortable. Because to hit the X card, sometimes you have to get to a certain point and be comfortable enough to still make that action in front of everybody.
Even with friends.
Friends.
I've got a plan to install foot pedals with little buttons.
So just all the buttons go on, but no one knows who. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think one of the I don't know, I'll say best things we did lately is we're using the X card for it's an in-game sort of X card thing, but it's kind of, I don't want to say normalizing using it, but it's allowing us to use it for additional sort of X card moments, which I think are also important to the game,
enforcing tone and things like that.
Yeah, enforcing tone and things like that, so that if you do get people that are more comfortable, I know we're kind of going into talking about a different area, but I think that's a really cool use of that, is just to be able to,
Stu's, and we're using that in Stu's Call of Cthulhu game right now. Because every once in a while you get in these uncomfortable situations, and your first response in uncomfortable situations is to crack a joke often or laugh. Yeah. So we're in these tense moments. We're in these tense moments with these monsters, and we kind of crack a joke, and we're like, oh wait, no, we're ruining the tone, even though that's how we're kind of breaking the ice for ourselves. Yeah. So and it's
whistling past the graveyard.
Yes, that's what. Yeah, that's the term.
Yeah.
All right.
There was one other game I wanted to mention. I haven't played it yet. Maybe you have. But it has to do with it does an excellent job, it seems like, of combining the character creation along with world building at the same time, and that's the Dresden Files. Where you pretty much have to create your city and everything as you're creating your characters and everything else. And it's kind of important because that's as much a character, the city is as much a character as your characters are. So there's ways to do it in session 0 where you combine it all together, and I think that you guys are all on the right track. So, just sit down with your GM and we'll hash it out, and bring beer.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
No, I think that's a great suggestion.
Thank you, Tarlin. Why do we game from Ed in Fluff?
Wait, Tarlin needs to write back and tell us how, what they decided on. How did the session go? What did you end up doing? All right, sorry, no, go ahead.
Yeah.
Why do we game from Ed in Florida, Nate, Minnesota? Who would like to read this?
Oh, I can do it.
Okay.
Dear douchebags, I hope this email finds you all well and out of hospital looking at you, Stu.
Yeah, I'm out.
I've been thinking, And that's always a dangerous thing. LeFou, I'm afraid I've been thinking.
A dangerous
I
pastime.
know. A kooky old man is Belle's father. Sanity's only so-so. Okay. Wheels in my head have been turning. I can't.
You're done. Yeah. Be done.
Did you lose your place?
One of the
Right,
time.
now I'm involving a plan. Okay.
I can see the email from Google. Content violation.
No, we didn't sing it that well. We have to sing it well enough
You'd
for
be
it to
surprised.
recognize it.
One of the topics I'm curious to hear you discuss is why you think people game. Or perhaps a better question is why you game. For me, the chance to create a world with a million interacting pieces is a chance to use a creative side of my brain that otherwise gets sadly little use. And when I look at many of the people around my table, I see a wide range of different reasons for them to do the same activity. Everything from escapism to exploring new things to feeling empowered to come across. For some, it is just a chance to explore something new, unseen, or imagined by anyone else before them. For others, it's a chance to see a piece of paper, have a Vorpal sword +5 written down. So I think there are stories going on inside their head that actually drive that. But with that concept of trying to understand why we game, I want to ask you why each of you think you game, and when you were first introduced to gaming. Also, did you get out of gaming for a period of time, and what brought you back? To give you my story, my gaming experience started young because my next older brother is 10 years older than I and is a hardcore gamer. I played Chainmail at 5.
Holy metric.
I know, that was wow. And GURPS at 8, yeah. I created man-to-man characters for my own copy at 9.
Wow. Man-to-Man was sort of like the pre-GURPS.
Wow.
This guy's old then. especially to play-
Metagame. What was the name of that company? Metagame. Oh, I can't remember it. But it was Steve Jackson worked for a gaming company before he started Steve Jackson Games.
Oh, that was a fantasy
And-
trip.
I think. Am I doing the right thing? Man-to-Man.
You
No,
did
Man-to-Man was. I think. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Man-to-Man was almost like a board game, like a single combat.
She's looking it up now.
I know.
I'll carry on. Man-to-man characters using my own copy at 9. I used gaming to escape from the world because it was so much better in my head. I imagined worlds of battle mechs and undead hordes, and while firmly in a hack and slash trademark, until my mid-teens, I knew there was more to it than that, even if I didn't roleplay at the table. I didn't get married until my mid-20s and gamed hardcore multiple times per week until now. I
Nice.
game maybe once a week with 3 of my 4 kids, 11, 13, and 17, and I still tell stories in my head, and it helps me keep my sanity. So, what are your stories? Second question, telling stories is a way to try to connect with the people around you. Whom would you love to game with, and what have you never had a chance to, and why? And, to end on a lighter note, why problem make when
Why
no problem have
make
you no
when
want
you no
to
problem
make?
have
Did you
you
just hit it?
don't want to make? Why problem make when you know
Okay,
problem
I'm ready.
have you don't
I
want to
pre-read
make?
this.
Okay. Cheers. Ed from Minnesota, now in Florida. P.S. Storch Harris.
There's your man.
Stork's hair is
Great.
There
great.
it is. There's Man to Man.
Yeah.
Oh, it is Steve
It's a
Jackson.
source book
85.
for first
that look familiar?
GURPS.
Looks familiar
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah.
Very generic.
Oh, it is Steve
fantasy.
Jackson. It's Steve Jackson.
It is
Games.
Steve
Okay.
Jackson. It's-
That may have been the
probably-
standalone combat system before he came out with GURPS.
Boy, that looks familiar to me. That looks, the whole gladiator thing on the top. Yeah,
Wow.
seems very familiar.
So why did you start gaming? Wow, that's like a deep
Mm-hmm.
philosophical question.
Right, sure is.
1, 2, 3, not it.
Why do you start gaming? Or he's asking why do you game, which is a different question.
Right.
Why did I start
And
gaming?
start
Because
gaming,
a friend
and-
from
yeah.
junior high school named Craig invited me and a couple buddies over to his house, and we played the D&D Red Box set. And,
Yeah, I want to ask each of you, why each of you game, and when you were first introduced to gaming.
Okay.
It's a two-part
It's
question.
a two-part question, yeah.
Actually, also, why did you get
Yeah.
out of gaming for a period of time, and what brought you back? So it's a
Yeah.
four-part question.
Okay. All
very
right. Should I start?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Junior high school, Buddy Craig bought the D&D Red Box. I don't know if it was basics. I don't remember. His came with dice, and then right after that, we bought sets, and they didn't come with dice. They came with little chits because there was a dice shortage. Because there's only one company making them at the time.
That's bananas.
And we played through the sample dungeon, and I was hooked. And it was that. And it was now why I game. There's two parts about GMing I like most. One is the world creation part, and that's not just making the world, but coming up with the organizations that are in conflict and creating something that's got a lot of sources of conflict in it. That's a fun thing. That, in fact, I just wrote another article about that.
Join Patreon.
It'll be on Patreon, I think, next month, or maybe in December. I don't know. I'm trying to get ahead. But that to me is a lot of fun. But that's to me that's more of like a solo experience. That's I'm going to sit down, I'm going to open up OneNote, and I'm going to start writing. And I'm going to come up with stuff, and I'm going to just throw out ideas. Some of it might get used, some of it might not get used. Once you have the player characters, like, well, those things are never going to happen. And, I better expand on these, that kind of thing. And the other thing I really like doing is when you get to sort of the mid-game part of a game, when the players have sort of taken over the reins of the game. Because when it start out, usually the players really don't know what's going on yet. They don't know who the big bad is. They don't know
So we never do.
what the meta plot is or whatever. But once they sort of have that and they start initiating their own plans, then the GM is just reacting. And that's, to me, that's easy. And I have all this prep that I've done, and it's like, they're doing. I didn't expect them to do that. Look, I came up with something for that, or I don't. I have to come up with something on the fly. But once you get to that sort of mid-game point, to me, that's the funnest part of GMing, because that's the part where the prep is gone at that point. I mean, my prep will be a paragraph or two notes to myself on what might happen in the next session.
It's funny because he asked why you game, and you turned it into why you GM.
Yeah,
because you game because you like to GM.
I do. I'm a control freak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Control freaks GM a lot. Yeah.
You just no. That was really. I just had a little
Ding ding. All right.
interesting.
Oh, and the hiatus, I did stop gaming for
You did.
20 years.
Ever?
No, not quite 20 years. I stopped probably around 94 and started back up around maybe 2008? Is that when we started back up? It was
2010.
Well, we
Yeah.
started the show in 2009.
No.
Yeah.
But I think we started before then because I
Yeah.
bought those
okay.
books the year before.
Because it came
that.
out 2008, so that
Yeah, I think
Right.
Yeah.
the big
It was
three had
brand
just
new.
come out.
Yeah.
So I picked them up and then
nice.
started reading.
Yeah.
But and I quit because marriages and children.
Yeah.
And then when my kids got old enough to be able to not kill themselves in the house without being constantly watched, I want a hobby again. So. Or another hobby.
Another hobby.
Yeah.
You have a lot.
Why are you looking at me?
Yes. It's your turn. I don't want to go next.
I could probably tell you why you game. It's because you read The Lord of the Rings.
I have a little bit of a. I think I have a better answer than that. But
perfect.
yes, I love Lord of the Rings.
Because
but-
it dovetails with mine a bit too. Which
Okay.
is all right. So young Stork, grade school.
Oh.
A friend of young Stork's.
Still great hair.
He used
Yeah.
to hang out at the house. He was really into war games, and he was much older. He was like 5 years older than us, 4 or 5 years older than us. So he had, I think, it was the Battle of Midway, or what's that really giant one where they literally had a room. They had kind of a big house.
The Longest Day.
It might be one of those. It literally had a room with the map all strewn out. And so my buddy opens the door and goes, "You want to check this out? Look at it."
takes
He
like
opens it up.
20 hours
There's
to play.
all of these ships everywhere, and it's like they had to walk around the perimeter in their socks, and they're like tiptoeing across and moving the thing. And it took like a week to play this game, and I was just fascinated. It was great. But he was also into D&D. So my friend started talking about this D&D thing, and so we got a copy of Chainmail. I think his brother said, here, I'm into this war game. You guys can play this. So we started out making characters and tried to play a little game of Chainmail. And about that same time, Chainmail was already old. The box set had come out. So, all right, now we're hooked.
Well, Chainmail was the miniatures rules.
It was. And again, because this guy was a war gamer, that's what he came out with. It was Chainmail. But we'd already heard about Chainmail and D&D. He'd had Chainmail. So anyway, we went down to the hobby store and bought the little box set like you did. And I think I still have one of those dice. One of the green dice from the original box set.
Up ones.
Yeah.
You
Nice.
had to use a crayon to.
And I think we might have played the adventure. We were like reading the rules as we
Yep.
made characters, and it was just he and I, and so we just bastardized the whole thing together. But we kind of figured it out, and it turns out once we started playing, some of our other friends we knew were playing through their big brothers. So we ended up with this group, and one thing led to another. So smash cut into high school. I'm a weird outcast kid, and all my friends are creative types and computer types and the chess player types, and they all just naturally, turns out they all like to, and it's a lot of the theater types too, like to game. And so one thing led to another. We just sort of gamed all through high school. Our reading influences affected this because I started out reading Lord of the Rings and Conan, and so we all wanted to play Lord of the Rings and Conan. And then comic books have found my way.
Yeah.
So then we started playing super games, and we played superhero games for 4 or 5 years, or variations thereof. Star Wars came out, so then we were playing science fiction games or superhero science fiction games, and all of those. And D&D kind of fell by the wayside. We tried all the flavors of games because after it seemed like in those heady early years, there was a new fantasy or a new role-playing game coming out like every month. There was Rune Quest and Dragon Quest and D&D and then there were all these add-ons, the Grimoires, Arduin Grimoires, and then all of these Traveler, and so all of these games that we wanted to try them all. So somebody would buy one and they'd run it through, and that campaign would last 3 or 4, 5 sessions sometimes. So we played all these games. Come college, we get together in summer, but after a while it all sort of petered out. People went away to school. I ended up going away to school and staying down here, so the gaming groups just sort of fizzled and broke up. And after college, I played once or twice in college, was busy doing other things.
Right.
After college, huge hiatus until I met Stu, and Stu secretly said, "I'm thinking about running a game again." In fact, my mom
we've known each other for almost 20 years.
almost 20 years at that point. And my mom had given me a book called...
and we didn't know each other as game.
Well, not really. We'd sort of talk about it in sort of disdainful terms. Oh, yeah, I used to game. I'm over that. I grew up. I don't need that anymore. And then my mom had bought this book called The Elvish Gene and Growing Up Strange.
Right.
And I've read it, and I'm like,
yeah.
it was really fun and interesting. I gave it to Stu. Stu was like, this is a really good book. And the next thing I know, Stu's like, I'm thinking about running a game.
That's right. I forgot all about that book.
Yeah,
There
we
were
talked about that one a
two.
lot the first few seasons.
Yeah.
There were two books. The Elvish Gene and Growing Up Strange. Is that by the British guy?
Yes, it is.
There's another book that came out that was by a stand-up comedian who was an
Yeah.
American. There's an American version which is just depressing.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
one thing led to another, and Stu was my gateway. I guess we enabled each other and started gaming with each other.
And then
again.
people came out of the woodwork.
And then-
it's
and
like,
then it
we know
turns
a
out-
lot of people who used to game.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair, who knew?
And that was probably a 25-year dead zone in between, where I got out of school and then just had a career and a family, and I just didn't even really think about it. At that point, I was already doing Ren Fair, and so I was still storytelling,
Yeah.
just not, and there was sort of the role-playing games had kind of died on the vine at that point anyway. So, there was D&D 3.0 and Pathfinder hadn't even come out yet, and that was just like it. Everything else Traveler was out of print. All these games had sort of gone. GURPS was only into its 3rd iteration, I think. So for the longest time, there was really nothing new.
And that was really kind of that's probably around the time that White Wolf really took off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, don't tell that to the 90s kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, man. Do you have an answer, Gina?
I have. I started playing because I've told this story before, but I was always kind of gaming curious, and I didn't think I knew anybody who played through high school, etc. And then about I think it's 9 years ago now. My best friend Joe was going to get back into gaming, and after like a 15-year hiatus, and he's a GURPS guy. But we were going to start playing 4E, or he was going to start playing 4E, and I said, I want to come watch. Like, I'm going to come drink beer and watch, like I'm watching a TV show or something. And he's like, you are not allowed to watch. You have to play.
Right.
And it was the best thing ever, and I fell in love with it. And I think that's the why I game is, I think at our heart, most of us are somewhat social creatures, or when we want to be, for some people. But I think it's just another way of expressing that sort of camaraderie and that fun with people that you like to be with. So instead of going to see a movie or going to a pub or going to a bar or watching a football game, you can sit around a table. And this brings me to my next thing, which is I just love that storytelling part. And I love seeing what happens. And this was my little aha moment when you were talking, is that I'm the one at home or in my life or in my job that has to keep shit in order and everything's under control and things are super organized and I know where everything is. But I love not knowing what the hell is going to happen?
Right.
And it's just, there is something that's good for me, Gina, about that, like, letting go enough to, like, have 3, 4, 5 other people at the table doing the same thing and seeing what the beautiful thing is that you're creating together. Because it's, and sometimes it's, you know, it's not always, and you're chasing that high always too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Those awesome moments, like, you chase every single time you game. And in particular, I love just exploring the narrative through, like, my character. Like, it's not all about my character, and I don't want it to be all about my character, but, like, how my character, who that person is and how they are from game to game and moment to moment and how they fit in this narrative. And they help the narrative evolve, but they're not the only piece. It's like quilting together, or I don't know.
It's like a quilting bee.
You know what
of stories.
I'm a chick. I got very. I got. Well, I'm sorry. This is not a gender thing. It isn't.
You know what?
But I got very feely about this because
It's-
I was like, oh.
It's interesting what you're saying, because if you've ever really been on stage in a play or in a musical or something, all of those terms are exactly the terms that actors use. Where you're in the middle of telling the story, and you're chasing that high.
Yeah.
Because you're caught in the moment, you're in the present, you're reacting to the people on the stage, and you're aware that there's an audience there, and you can feel them breathing and gasps occasionally over here, you know, and it
Those beats,
gives you that thing
Yeah.
going on, because
That's
you're
a
telling
dopamine hit.
at the base level here with the gaming and with acting, you're telling a story.
Yeah.
Sometimes just amongst yourselves, but really that's what actors are doing. You're telling the story
Well,
amongst
even
yourselves.
with actors, and when you have a literal script,
Yeah.
The way that story gets told and the nuances with the people who are, and you're riffing off of, are true to those people at that moment. So it's like, what happens is kind of can be freaking magic.
And it's exciting, and even it's the same thing over and over again. There's a high that you get when you're on stage, that in that storytelling moment.
And I almost quit, but I haven't. But it's probably, I don't know, too long. Don't read. I'll tweet or something. But you know, I know Kimmy has seen this too. Like, if you guys have follow any sort of social media, you see throughout the year that the community can be rough. I will say there's a woman that I follow called, and Kimmy, I think you follow her too. It's at Blue Stocking, etc.
Yeah.
And you can see that there are times in the community where things are. I always thought nerds were lower on the food chain. We think of ourselves as being lower on the food chain. There's Lord of the Rings shit all over the planet sometimes. So people chase the conch. So things can get a little, you know. And if you see different people's stories about, you know, earlier this year there was some stuff that was pretty.
The people that have been perceive themselves excluded from cliques make their own really super uber clique, and they don't even know it.
Yep.
About being excluded.
Yeah. Well, it's like, we're the outcasts. We're gonna make our own clique.
Oh, I see
We're the
what you're saying
people's front
about the
Judea.
nerds being the
Right.
Yeah, no, it's just and Kate is her name, but she talks about that stuff a lot. But I don't know. I love gaming too much, and I enjoy being with y'all and being with my friends, and so.
And people on the internet be awful.
Yeah, no, that's part
Really?
of that.
I did nothing but pleasant exchanges.
You
with
don't
people.
know. You don't. You haven't been on social media in 10 years.
Yeah,
Probably
and
a
if
reason
you-
for that.
I've seen so
Wait a
many people
minute.
take breaks from social media. It's
The
Yeah.
Judean people's front is a bunch of splinterers. Has anyone? I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. No, I was kind of.
Oh, you should go.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk.
You
I'll
gotta
talk
do-
about the thing I saw and
I'm
how much I
excited
like
for
it.
the
Okay.
start.
Well, there's still like backup questions. We're not even done. We got.
Yeah, we still have to
What?
pick.
Yeah.
Like, we have to all say one person we want a game with that we've never gamed with. So I totally started gaming, like, and I think it's evolved. Like, looking back now, I 100% started gaming as like a power fantasy, because I grew up like loving Wonder Woman, and but even when I was growing up, I was lucky enough to have like the George Perez run of Wonder Woman. But for the most part, even like
Really good.
Yeah, so good. But even for the most part, quote, strong female characters generally weren't super strong. They could be really smart or something like that, but they generally weren't physically able and like battle able to do a lot of things. So I think that's kind of where I started is like I've talked before about how I kind of started actually with I did like D&D with like my friends in junior high in like the mid 90s, and then like it was terrible because we were all like children, and it says there was a lot of rules. We tried that, but I actually really got into it with gaming online and stuff like that, which I still consider, at least the way I did it, it was role playing, 100%. Learned Elven languages, way hardcore role playing, chat rooms, things like that. And in these spaces, I was able to be this badass warrior despite being a woman and all these other things. So I think 100% it started down that path. And yeah, it was kind of the beginning of my being interested in GMing too, looking back on it, because we played Ultima Online was one of my first addictions. 100% was an actual addiction too, but all day, all the time.
No.
Yeah, it was good. I mean,
We did EverQuest, yeah.
Yeah.
Remember Stu had to quit because he was up all night a couple of nights. He's like, I gotta quit this.
Yeah.
I've heard a report people saying that certain types of video games, and they were talking specifically about Fortnite, might be as addictive as cocaine.
Shocked, I tell you, shocked.
Yeah, I mean,
And so is sugar, they say. Cocaine isn't doing very well.
No. But anyway, so these, and because it was before there were quests in games. There weren't quests in Ultima Online. It was basically you'd go kill stuff and your character would get more powerful, but you didn't get a quest that came up with EverQuest, and some games following it came up with that stuff.
Still don't solve some of those.
Yeah. So as players, we would design our own storylines. And you'd actually and we started. I was part of an elf guild. I'm sure you're all shocked. That the council would come up with these big storylines, and we'd actually make alt characters and plant them in towns around, and have them basically be NPCs that people would get different things from. And once in a while, the game would run these once in a lifetime events, but it was hardcore. And so we'd actually plan out these full what now I see are the same things that you design for a role-playing game.
Just made an adventure.
Yeah, we 100% made an adventure, and it was a team collaboration thing that then the guild would go through an adventure that we designed for them.
That's super cool.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially looking back.
Our EverQuest Elven group used to do the same thing for initiation. They would have people go through and do some sort of quest for the guild, but it was all people with alts that you had to run into. I'd forgotten about that until you just brought that up.
And chat rooms and things like that. And then eventually I got into like tabletop gaming, but with that background of MMO role playing. And I think my why I play games has definitely changed now. And especially if you look sometimes at the character, I still like playing badass women characters, but I also play some of the characters that are closest to me and dearest to me now are ones that aren't that. I think now I much more role play as kind of, like you were saying, kind of like the acting. It's fun to try on other things. Mm-hmm. And I find that when I try on characters, every time I learn something about myself. So putting on Raven for the demigods, I'd never played a trickster kind of not a fighter character. I'm oh no, my character would totally bounce. She wouldn't want to be in this fight, and that's was really different for me, and I learned stuff about me, and I don't know, I love that part of it now. The collaborative storytelling, like Gina said, 100%. That stuff is awesome, and I think the theater kid in me loves that kind of high of these great moments where everyone's firing, and it's
so cool.
Awesome. But also just kind of that leaving the table and being that was interesting. I really liked when that happened. I guess I am more like this character in some ways than I realized. I don't know. Just gets really deep really fast.
No, it does.
It does.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
There's no simple answer to this.
No.
No, but I'm with you on that. I just think you learn so much about yourself exploring different types of characters, even if you kind of have a go-to. But it's that whole thing of, and I think I've mentioned this before, but that whole thing of people learn a lot when they're out of their comfort zones.
Yeah.
And so I do think you learn a lot. Yeah, so I think
Well,
that's very true.
so you make an unpleasant character, or you're forced to. I can think of in my Traveler game Trig, right? Where I just
He
rolled
was
up.
an unpleasant motherfucker.
He was, but I just rolled up. He just couldn't do anything. Way, because he was shocked, I'm sure, that I rolled a character that was completely ineffective at anything. So I was forced to play this ineffective character, and I figured out a way to do it. But it brings me to the point where you commit to a character, and then you commit to making the mistakes that character would make, and it sometimes puts you in an uncomfortable situation, because at the end of the day, I'm kind of a people pleaser. I just want to make people happy, and so if you make a character that is unpleasant, it's hard on you, and it's hard, but you're committing to the character. So, and that's an acting thing, right?
Yeah.
There. You're well, this is what I should do, this is what would be best for the party, but this is what the character would do. Well, we're going with that. And it does take you into interesting places and makes for a much more interesting game than just saying, I roll, I hit, I help the party, and off we go.
Yeah. I think you're right on, though, Stork, when you're talking about doing fair, because I feel like fair definitely kind of hits hits a lot of the same cylinders that tabletop RPG does. And I feel like for a while that kind of like hit the snooze button on like that need for
Scratch
that
that
same
itch,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
interesting.
Did you quit then between when you were doing, you said like early days of doing, so then you didn't play for a long time until you were playing online gaming?
Yeah, I never stopped online role-playing games.
Got it.
I actually only stopped like 6 months ago. Honestly, for the first time, I stopped using World of Warcraft. When they did the layoffs last year, I quit like in solidarity with a couple of my friends who got laid off. Yeah, I guess it was more than 6 months ago now. It's a while ago now. But yeah, like the tabletop gaming was on and off until Stu invited me into his game, which is sort of a kind of in the dark ask. It was kind of funny. He was like, "Hey, do you do this thing?" I was like, "Yeah." Yeah, I do the thing. And it's funny because it was like one of those things, because at the time, like, it was still something that wasn't like super cool.
No.
So it was almost like this, like, it's like a drug deal, like in my imagination of me who's never actually done a drug deal. Like, so you got the stuff, like, or trying to buy a sundial or
it's
whatever,
true.
like a watch.
That's not how it works.
No, it's not.
I'm trying to remember.
Just like
We've seen it on TV.
like this like slow little like exploratory conversation until getting to the thing. Well, would you want to do that again? And you're like, yeah.
It was the Ghostbusters game, right? That was the first?
No, that was the first AP we recorded, but this was way back the
Eldamy.
4E game.
The Eldamy game.
Yeah, the
4E
D&D game that ended up with like 50 people in it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
14 or
what
15.
yeah, well, there was like 9.
A lot.
But that's what happens. Like, so many people had like been off gaming for a while. When a couple of us, like, suddenly it's like everybody who you talked to suddenly said yes, which I don't think you were expecting.
No, I did not.
But it worked out well.
That's like when you invite people to a party and about half to a third of the people that you invite actually show up.
Yeah.
So that's what I was expecting.
Yeah. No.
And that would have been like 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
And
was-
it ended up being, at one
was
point, like
time.
15.
Yeah. It was a
You
lot.
were an influencer.
It was.
You were in the zeitgeist.
It was
you were like ahead of the zeitgeist.
There was a big mistake.
Well, you were doing what you do with bands, which is I better make sure I have 2 on each part, just in case other people don't show up. And everybody showed up.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's exactly it.
Why are there 18 people in this band?
Oh my God. Claire and I were the girls. Oh, and Linnea was there.
Linnea was
And
there.
let's see who else was
There
there.
was all the WoW players, too.
Yeah. No. Yeah. You invited a whole bunch of us WoW players.
Right.
Yeah. Oh man, that was.
I was
funny.
to say those are the only 3 I remember.
Jessica
women.
showed up
I feel like
briefly,
there
and
was
Jen
another
showed up
one.
briefly. But nobody
Tappy was in it.
Yeah.
Tyler was in it.
Because it
Casey
used to
and
be
Bruce.
Casey,
in
Bruce.
the early days of the podcast. There were a couple casts that
Yeah.
had.
Like 7 people.
Yeah,
in them,
'cause
Well,
I
and this is-
remember
this
people
actually-
talking about sitting on yoga balls.
You're sitting on yoga balls. This is the perfect chance to ask about
Okay.
the second question, which is whom would you like to game with that you've never had a
Oh,
chance to,
man.
and why? That stumps me.
I would like to game with my little sister.
Oh,
So
the
she's like
feels.
yeah, well, there's only a 3-year difference, so she's like my age basically. Now that we're adults, it's like doesn't matter. But she and I both have like a theater background. I think she'd be amazing at it. And I don't know, because I mean we're both children of a theater teacher, and like I just think it would be amazing. I think she'd love it. She loves like online gaming, and I just can't. Like she lives just too far away, like just a little bit too far to like jump in. But I think it'd be amazing. I think we'd have a lot of fun.
I think I've gamed with both my kids separately, but I don't think I've gamed with them together.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
I did. Maybe I did once with Grapham in a AD&D game briefly. It was like a little module they ran through, but I've never really had a chance to do that. I was really stumped with this. I'm like, is there somebody famous I'd like to game with? And I'm like, oh, maybe I'd like to do with Stan Lee, but no, he's weird. Maybe Jack Kirby, no, he'd want to take control. Or how about some famous writer? Like, no, they'd have it all worked out. And I'm like, I don't know.
I got a list.
There is one person who's been a GM, but I've never gamed with, like in a game with, and that'd be Dave Kazay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've never
for sure.
gamed with Dave Kazay. I've only gamed
Yeah.
for Dave Kazay.
Yeah.
It might be fun to see him as a player and be and work
That's a
stuff out.
very good answer.
yeah.
I have a ton of people, but I think it'd be hilarious to play like D&D 5e with Gary Gygax and break his brain because like get all RP-ish and
That's
whatever.
a great answer.
But Chris Perkins, I love Chris Perkins, who's a WotC stable awesome GM. But yeah, there's a ton of people. But yeah, I would say those two come top of mind.
Nice.
I would say my kids, but that's never going to happen.
Well, you kind of did.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to
Sort
happen.
of, kind of, sort of. But you know what? What I would really like to do is have a table full of players who are the GMs, who are the subjects of GM horror stories, and just
good
see how broken are they? Can they actually recognize
We're just chain smoking
a nice game rather than
drinking.
like a horrible, controlled, railroady piece of crap? Or would they not? And if it looks like it's not working, then just give them the worst experience.
Then we do you do a debrief and they talk about how crap your game was.
Right,
Yeah.
And
yes.
it's just like
I would
that
love
was
to do
just-
that.
Well, they're just going to sit around and say how much more awesome their games are than yours
Right.
as you're rolling. Are you really going to do it that way? Sure, I would do it.
Probably.
Don't you want a game with Luke Crane? I
No.
totally want a game with Luke Crane.
I would like to see how he manages the
Yeah.
stress of running that burning wheel.
Absolutely.
If he does, I bet she doesn't use half the rules.
He just pushes you into the cornfield. You don't like mine? Get out! Get out! Get out!
That's a good question. That's a good side topic. As like people who are really good at, or even the people who design games, if when they run their own games, do they use the whole rule set?
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
They wrote it, so you're like, who's going to question them? It's like, I don't.
Sir, excuse
doing
me,
this
I don't
wrong.
think this is in
Am
your.
I?
No, I wrote it. I know what I'm doing.
100%
Yes, sir.
gamers who would do that.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
All right. Crunch versus Fluff from Ben in Texas. Necromancer.
Are we doing it?
Oh, sure. We can split it too. Okay, so greetings, Deutsch Baguettes. I found the show after Tappy had already left on his hiatus, but I took great pleasure delving into your rich, loamy backlog.
Yum.
That was my ugh. It was there that I uncovered the juicy morsel of the crunch versus fluff controversy.
Like a peanut.
A peanut and marshmallow.
Or corn.
Crunch and fluff. It's a peanut and marshmallow. But they're good
It
right
just
together.
won't go away. It's still there. So in the spirit of Spider-Man getting its fourth reboot,
Oh, boy.
I decided to pull an epic, I love this phrase, necro post, and share my thoughts such as they are. I'll try to make it short. Crunch refers to number crunching, of course. So a crunchy game has rules that just tell you to do math. Telling a story is optional. So in D&D, when you try to stab a dude, you roll a d20, add your strength modifier and proficiency bonus, and compare the number to the target's armor class. If you meet or exceed that, then you roll a d8, add your strength modifier, and subtract the result from their HP. If their HP drops to 0 or lower, they can't fight anymore. The rules don't really make you do anything more than that. Do you want to take over?
Sure. In a fluffy game, on the other hand, the rules direct you to tell the story. So if you roll to directly engage a threat in masks, either the GM gets to describe the narrative outcome, or you inflict a condition, like frightened or angry on the target, and pick from options that drive the fiction one way or the other. So like something, like take something from them or give an ally an opening. So for me, the difference has less to do with how simulationist the game is, or the quantity of the math. It's more to do with whether the rules facilitate storytelling. So Fate would be considered fluffy because it requires a player to explain how an aspect of their character or the scene influences the outcome when they tap the aspect. Certainly fluffy compared to the gaming systems that were prominent before Fate came onto the scene. I apologize for the length. Don't do that. Keep up the great work, Ben from Texas.
Never apologize for your length.
All right. All right, you're wrong.
Oh no.
The original argument the way here's the problem with fucking vocabulary
Yeah.
in any subculture is there's no fucking glossary.
No.
And no one will ever agree on one. No. Crunch and fluff exist in every game.
Yes.
The crunch is the rules. The fluff is the setting. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm not even
Like,
gonna.
I'm
I'm not
just
even
gonna
gonna.
go, sure.
No, but, no. Let's just let
I'm
it
not
lie.
disagreeing. Like, that is true.
Right.
But I do think that specific games tend to one more than the other as far as influence. Like, yes.
G versus.
I've never. Well, let me just say until this, I've never heard the term fluffy game ever, not once. Crunchy game, yes. GURPS, Hero, math-heavy games people will call crunchy. I've never heard anyone call a game fluffy. I hear rules light, but I've never heard fluffy.
I feel like we've said that
Fluff
before.
is setting. Fluff is always.
Think of
That's
fluff a splat or
Yeah.
setting or
right.
the-
It's.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that there are systems, and I would say like PBTA, like it's much more towards the fluff of like where you've done than the crunch part of it. Like there are systems that lean into the fluff, make themselves fluffy, I guess, more than there are systems, and then there's systems that tend to lean into the crunch piece too. I'm saying I'm agreeing that all games have both,
Yes.
but I think that, and we've talked about before how some systems lend themselves more to one than the other.
Until this, I have never heard fluff used to describe game mechanics, ever. Fluff is not. Game mechanics are crunch.
Yeah.
Fluff is other stuff. So I mean, if we're redefining, which people are
No, it's not.
always welcome to do.
Yeah.
I mean, because this initial argument happened because Tappy said Fate was a crunchy game. That's how the whole Armageddon of
Yeah.
Crunchgate happened.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it is. Crunch
And I
game.
was going to say
And-
I would
and-
never call fake fluffy.
no, well, his
Yeah.
definition of crunchy was mine.
Difficulty.
Mine was math
Yeah.
because it's based on number crunching, crunchy math. Tappy's whole thing was if the rules of the game insert themselves constantly into the game, if you're constantly dealing with the game mechanics of the game, he would consider that a crunchy game.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be complicated game mechanics.
Right.
It just and that I don't know if I would use the word crunch to describe that, but certainly there are games where the game mechanics tend to stick their big fucking nose into the story
Yeah.
even when you don't want them to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there are also games that seem like that, I think, because the game mechanics are so alien from more traditional role-playing games. First time I played something that was Fate-ish, it's like
Yeah.
I'm constantly spending time because it's very different than playing a regular role-playing game. And the same
100%,
thing, and
yeah.
the same thing with PBTA games. You're constantly sitting there when it's starting out, looking at your character sheet.
I
and
wanna
saying,
do this thing.
Which one of my
Yeah.
things? Which one of these
Yeah.
can apply? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know what I would call that. I still maintain I wouldn't call it crunch, but that deserves its own term because there are games that are where
Rules
the
light. Like you were saying that are rules light
Well,
or that not intrusive or
there either are or aren't intrusive. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of that has to do with perception and familiarity more than anything else. Because I'll bet you there's someone out there who's been playing, what were we just talking about? Luke Crane,
burning wheel.
Burning Wheel.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people out there who've been running Burning Wheel for a
Oh, yeah.
decade.
Yeah, I've
And they run it like a well-oiled machine,
Yeah.
and players would come into that going, "Oh, this is the best ever!" Right?
Yep.
Yeah. Mook and GURPS.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you play it with
Yeah.
him and you don't feel
Yeah.
like it's a crunchy system. You're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
He's like, roll the dice. Oh, this is happening. You're like, okay, great. It's
Right.
a simple
Yeah.
system.
It's only crunchy when everybody's trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. All right, so now you're grappling. Anybody know what you have to do to grapple?
I agree. I think we've talked about that before too. That was a what did
Erica
I wanna-
Odd. We'll call it flunch.
Fun.
Fiasco maybe is
Narrative heavy game where the mechanics are always present.
narrative.
Yeah.
If splat,
It's flunchy.
if the splat, if setting and splat is fluffy, so fluffy
Oh,
things
man.
go splat and crunchy things break.
Oh.
Yeah. Just trying to work up the words.
We just need to, we'll add
Maybe.
like a glossary to the Happy Jacks website.
There used I put one up somewhere. I don't remember where it was. It
There's
might
a
actually
couple.
already be there.
There's a couple in the
Oh,
About
yeah.
section.
Yeah.
There are.
Yeah. But we need to add railroading to that. That's
Great. It was-
Right.
We may have to come up with it. But then we all have to agree on these terms. You can't change it from there on.
Yeah.
Well,
which we're
yeah,
never
good
going to
luck.
do. 'Cause our opinions drift and
That's
then
why
our...
we create our own, and then it's like nobody
Yeah.
can argue with us what they mean because
Yeah,
we
but
made
even
it up.
we have to
Yeah.
agree on it because sometimes we're like, I've modified my idea of crunch now to
Yeah.
include this. And, you can't. We agreed, wrote it down.
Well, yeah, I feel like.
We'll have the Happy Jacks Constitution.
Oh boy.
Oh no.
We'll have a constitutional convention.
The
where all of the
Jackanary.
delegates will come and
We'll have the. It's not the.
we'll sit around with canes and knock, 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 knock.
Like instead of a dictionary, it'll be the Jackanary, and it's all of our definitions
Oh,
are written down
Jackanary.
exactly.
Jacktionary.
Everyone's got to
Jackanary.
dress in 18th century clothes.
No.
Yes, that's the only part of this I like.
And have little side tables and canes or knock them on the ground when we applaud.
We're gonna have more than a
for that.
two-party system, though.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have initially they didn't have a.
I know.
That happened
Then
right
Alexander
away.
Hamilton and Jefferson.
Right away. Right away.
All the things. Oh my god.
Speaking of people being tribal. All right.
You right? That's funny.
But I have not heard that term.
Fluffy game.
A fluffy game, or a game that has fluffy mechanics.
Because I think
Is
Or
Master
that's
a fluffy
that's an
game?
oxymoron, because
fluffy game.
fluff and mechanics, fluffy mechanics. No, because fluff is not the mechanics. Mechanics are the crunch.
It's fine.
I kind of am with you on that.
Yeah.
But
Huh?
I'm kind of with you on that.
Okay.
And that's why if something gets crunchy, it's because there's, yeah.
And I've never even heard of like a fluffy moment in a game.
But I do
I've
feel like, sure,
Yeah.
because like there isn't a real like rule about what those things mean.
No, there
And,
isn't.
I mean, there's a dictionary. There are several dictionaries
Yeah.
about what they literally mean.
Right.
But with regard to gaming, not really.
Yeah. The chat room says that our second amendment would be the right to fall downstairs, but only if under 50 feet.
You know, okay,
That
so
one is the best.
I've been watching this on our forums recently. The people have been going off the stork stare test, right? And everybody's sort of ridiculing it. And what's so funny to me is that they're going down and giving these great examples, and it's exactly proving my point because people are discovering a lot about game systems by the stork stare
stairs.
test.
Right.
So, you know what? It's tried and silly as it seems. You can bash it all you want.
good
You guys are
test.
learning a lot.
Oh, man.
You've
Very
taught me
good.
things.
Well, and the whole stork stare test thing is like you get a really good idea of how damage is adjudicated and how minute the
how
rules can
lethal
be,
it is.
and how lethal it is in one simple little test.
Right.
Right. You can figure out how you're going to take damage, how lethal it is, how and even if like these things are like. Do they even include stairs in damage? I mean, how would you figure that out? Like, Nindi, you're like, there's no
Well,
there's
generic
nothing,
falling
there's no
damage.
falling.
Almost every game's got falling damage, and which is basically what you're testing.
Yeah.
And it realize, yeah. Okay.
I know. It explains a lot. Anyway, it's been
All right.
very funny to me.
I think that's it.
Cool.
What's the thing?
He's singing along, whistling along with his own song.
Thank you very much for joining us for season 25, episode 12 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
I'm Stork.
My name is Gina.
And we'll see you next week, Friday, 7:12 p.m. Pacific time. HappyJacks.org/live. Until that time, we will leave you with a song.
And happyjacks.org/schedule for all our games that we have upcoming.
And that too.
Yeah. Bye.
Saint of the skillful game master, oh, guide us well with yes ending to avert a disaster, whether fate or curse or millions of apocalyptic acts, fellow listeners and every host will always have our backs. Unless you're playing D&D and then they'll give you crap.
We're out of time and out of space, lamenting for the human race. A cataclysmic crisis from the past. A small blue world, thunder torn, an apocalyptic nightmare born. And mankind better learn to cope with
fires ablaze. No quarter shall we give our foe, and neither will they, and this we know, as kinetic flares flash upon our display. Watch the glittering protectors rise! Inhuman foes meet your demise! And boom, 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 your end is nigh.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.
Bum, 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 bum.